Good morning. I wonder how many of you have heard of the recapitulation theory. Now, to recapitulate something is basically to recap something that you've discussed before um, that, that you want to understand. The recapitulation theory, though, is where you not only recap what has been given, but you actually give more detail to the latter part of the information. That means you start expounding on what has already been given. Now, let me give you an example. In Daniel chapter 2, you will recall we discussed the image that Nebuchadnezzar had seen. The head was of gold, the chest of silver, the belly and thigh of bronze, the legs of iron. Then we had the feet of iron and clay. And then the interesting thing is we had a stone cut out of a mountain, not by human hands. It crushes the statue, pulverizes it to powder, the wind blows it away, and then we have this stone filling the whole earth. Now, we remember that the gold was Babylon, the silver Medo Persia, bronze Greece, the legs, as we found out, was pagan Rome. But now we seem to see that there is more information given. In Daniel chapter 7, we have four beasts. Now remember in verse 17, it says these four beasts are four kingdoms. But now each kingdom, a little bit more detail is given regarding them. And we found out that the lion was Babylon again. And we found out that the bear was Medo Persia, the leopard-like beast, Greece. And then we come to this fourth beast. And this fourth beast isn't given a name. It's just described more. And we find out that this beast devours. It has iron teeth. It makes us see, or is equivalent to the iron legs, which again symbolizes the pagan Roman Empire. But I want you also to pick up now that we are going to get more detail as to this fourth beast. Daniel actually says in Daniel 7, and I want you to note in verse 7, the last part, it was different from all the former beasts, and it had 10 horns. Almost like we're drawn to the toes now of the image. But then he carries on by saying in verse 8, while I was thinking about the 10 horns, there before me was another horn, a little one, which came up among them. And 3 of the first horns were uprooted before it. This horn had eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth that spoke boastfully. Now, here we see that Daniel's attention is drawn to more detail at the end of what we already know. Now, down there, we find in verse 23 that the angel of the Lord doesn't want us to guess. Daniel's attention, as we see there in verse 20, I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head and about the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell. The horn that looked more imposing than the others, and that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. He says in verse 23, the angel that came gave the explanation. The fourth beast is the fourth kingdom that will appear on the earth. The pagan Roman Empire. It will be different from the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it. You will recall the difference was that this kingdom allowed them, the other kingdoms that it had overpowered, to govern themselves when it came to worship. But they had to pay tribute to Caesar. You recall how that the Pharisees tried to trap Jesus, to almost indicate that he was revolting against Caesar. But Jesus saw the trap that they tried to set. And he was angry with them, but called for a coin. And whose head was on the coin? Caesar's. What was his inscription? Caesar. And he said, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, but give to God what is God's. So important to understand this principle, dear friend, that we are to submit to the authorities. But when it comes to worshiping God, we can only worship the God of creation. But then I want you to notice that the angel goes further on to say, in verse 24, the 10 horns are 10 kings who will come up from this kingdom. After them, another king will arise, different from the early ones. He will subdue 3 kings. Now, I want you to notice that we don't have to guess what these horns are. They are kings. And this one horn uproots 3 as it rises, and becomes a dominant horn. We are going to see that one of these kings plays a very important role. And I want you to understand, as we conclude this study, that we are going to be building on everything that we've seen as we progress into the future. God wants us to be clear on what's going on and who these beasts represent. Remember that God is the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. He's not only the author of your faith, He's the finisher of your faith. May God always be supreme in your life.